Nations Health. And I'm also joined today, in addition to Elder Siamith, by two of my most valued colleagues, Dr. Evan Adams and Dr. Danielle Bain-Smith, and I'll let them take a turn introducing themselves, starting with Evan.
I just quit. I almost said aloha. Hi, everyone. It's Evan Adams here, and I have been away for the past year working in Hawaii on Native Hawaiian health leadership development. But I am almost back. Starting August the 1st, I'll be back in BC working with First Nations of BC. How exciting to be here with you today and with my colleagues to talk about some very interesting ideas and quite a long and fruitful collaboration with the Office of the Provincial Health Officer. And I look forward to getting started. Imot.
Tanche Kiwau, Silotsiat Nezut Kanita, Danielle Bain-Smith Dishnakashan, Sezitla Azezon, and Michifnia Piechodene at E. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danielle. I'm Echodene from Fort Nelson First Nation on my dad's side. I'm Red River Métis from Winnipeg on my mom's side. And I have the great honor of working as BC's Deputy Provincial Health Officer for Indigenous Health and being able to collaborate with Evan and the Office of the Chief Medical Officer over many years to as a part of the We Walk Together project. So we're so excited to share the progress and the findings of that with you today. And I'm also really honored and privileged to be calling in today from Lekwungen Tanakh and acknowledging Sauk Nation as the source of the drinking water in what we call here in Victoria. And thank you so much, Elder Virginia, for opening us in a good way. That felt really good. So Masi Cho. Back to you, Nell. Thanks.
Great, thank you both. So we have a really stacked agenda for you today to take you through the project and what we've done. We're going to start first with just a small overview of the role of the OCMO, and then Dr. Evan Adams will go over the We Walk Together research project, and we will show you the Vancouver Coastal film from their gathering, and then share some of the key lessons learned from the elders, knowledge keepers, and youth. We are also fortunate to have Siema here with us, who participated in the Fraser Salish gatherings and will give a reflection midway through today's presentation. And then in the second half of the session, Dr. Danielle Bain-Smith will share the work we are doing to develop a connection to land indicator. We'll provide First Nations audience members with an opportunity at the end to share thoughts on how we should be reporting on First Nations connection to land and to self-determination. So I'll just quickly take you through the role of our office. We wanted to share some background about our role and the origins and the purpose of the exploration that we did through the We Walk Together project. In many BC First Nations cultures, the traditional role of the watchman is to watch over, protect, and guide its people by standing guard, observing, and warning of impending dangers or challenges. Because of its importance, the watchman is depicted in carvings and atop poles in many communities. Inspired by these teachings, the Office of the Chief Medical Officer, or OCMO, holds an important role as the watchman at the First Nations Health Authority and acts as a guardian and champion of the health and wellness of First Nations people across the province through three functions: seeing and hearing by observing, monitoring, and gathering data from various sources to capture the story of health and wellness of First Nations; report by sharing the story of the health and wellness of First Nations people in BC to improve in those areas; and to guide or guard by providing a two-eyed seeing leadership approach to contribute to a strategic response at various health levels. In 2005, the Transformative Change Accord committed the Provincial Health Officer to regularly report on the health of First Nations people across BC to better understand how the health status of First Nations people differed from other residents of BC. The FNHA was established in 2013 and appointed the first ever Chief Medical Officer in Canada to advance First Nations self-determination and self-governance. And as I've mentioned earlier, we're so pleased to have former CMO, Dr. Evan Adams, with us today. Since then, the FNHA Chief Medical Officer and the BC Provincial Health Officer have formed a unique partnership based on mutual respect and collaboration to monitor and report on the health and wellness of First Nations people in BC. And I'll turn it over to Evan to talk about the PHWA.
Thanks, Nell, and thanks for starting us off so well, Elder Virginia. Always wonderful to see you. And how wonderful to see the fruits of our collaboration with the province, really. When I first started with the Office of the Provincial Health Officer in 2007, we were learning from the province about public health, even though we knew something about looking after ourselves, of course. And now that collaboration continues, but now I think with us leading, and definitely us as First Nations injecting our own ideas into what we think First Nations public health should be. So an important piece of the work between our two offices is the First Nations Population Health and Wellness Agenda. We call it PHWA, the Population Health and Wellness Agenda, which monitors and reports on 22 health and wellness indicators for First Nations people in BC. We are set to report on those 22 health and wellness indicators over a 10-year period from 2020 to 2030. And unlike traditional or the usual public health reporting, the Population Health and Wellness Agenda includes determinants of health, for example, education and housing, which are directly related to health, but are not health, and First Nations measures of health and wellness. Self-determination, culture, language, connection to land are deeply interconnected and form the roots of wellness for First Nations people in BC. And the inclusion of these roots of wellness indicators in the PHWA mark the first time First Nations measures of health and wellness are being included in a provincial public health report. Can we go to the next slide? When the Chief Medical Officer at the FNHA and the Provincial Health Officer's offices identified self-determination and connection to land as core determinants of health for First Nations people in BC, we didn't have a predetermined way to measure and monitor these indicators. We asked ourselves, how do we do this? We had never been directly included in population health reporting before. In 2019, the We Walk Together research project was established to inform our work in developing a connection to land indicator. That research is now complete, and we're excited to share our findings and how that informs this indicator development work. And as we develop measures for connection to land and self-determination, we are seeking and gathering feedback from targeted engagement opportunities such as this one to inform and validate the measures which will be included in the next Population Health and Wellness Agenda update. So if we go to the next slide, thanks. Our goal with this work is to come up with a good way to measure our connection to land as a determinant of health for First Nations people in BC, making the best, of course, of what data is already available to us. Instead of trying to create new data or ask for new data, making the best of what data is already available, while recognizing that we, of course, might need to change things to decolonize and indigenize things as better sources of information come along. So these are the questions that we're trying to answer today. How can we measure the access of First Nations people in BC to healthy lands and waters that support their wellness? How can we measure the health of the land and waters in BC? How can we measure the accountability of governments in advancing stewardship of lands and waters with BC First Nations governments? We would like to get your feedback in our discussion. Now, before we share the indicator ideas that we've developed, we would like to provide an opportunity for First Nations audience members to reflect on these questions again about how we can measure connection to land. So these questions are based on the themes of ancestral knowledge, land and water wellness, and accountability that were identified in the We Walk Together project. Our subjects spoke to us, and thematically we saw ancestral knowledge, land and water wellness, and accountability were things that they really wanted to talk about. So if you are a First Nations person and you have some initial thoughts on these questions, please share them with us in the chat. So again, if you have some thoughts about these questions as a First Nations person, please drop them in the chat. And we invite non-First Nations participants to take the opportunity to wait and listen and be supportive and maybe reflect on what lessons you could take from today or from your already existing partnerships with First Nations peoples. So while you're thinking about that, because we've been thinking about these questions and we're going to explore these questions, we just wanted to give you an initial opportunity to jot some ideas down. Let's go to the next slide, talk a little bit more about what we've learned. So the We Walk Together project is a joint research project that explored First Nations perspectives of connection to land as a determinant of health and wellness through land-based gatherings and sharing circles with knowledge keepers and youth in collaboration with regional planning committees. So the project took place in 3 distinct territories. The gathering in Fraser Salish region was conducted in Stolo territory. The Vancouver Coastal Gathering took place in Lil'wat territory, and the Northern Gathering took place on the territories of Lake Babine Nation. So using an exploratory two-eyed seeing approach, the team followed nation-specific protocols using sharing circles and land-based activities like medicine walks, ice fishing, and tours of key sites to speak to our informants. And I always remember one of the elders saying, "We don't know who you think we are. Let us tell you who we are." And they talked about their own lands, and we did some deep listening. Let's go to the next slide. In the midst of all that, we had our cameras out. And we're thrilled to be releasing the 3 regional gathering films and sharing the findings from our research report. During the validation gatherings, knowledge keepers told us that these films need to be shared with everyone, including those working in government, health, and natural resources, so they can be touched by the rawness of the people and understand what they said they need to heal. They also felt the films are an important way of keeping their teachings alive for the benefit of younger generations, up and coming generations. So today's launch is a key part of honoring the wishes of these knowledge keepers. And instead of simply telling you about our findings or having you go and read it from an academic publication, we are pleased to share with you the We Walk Together film of Vancouver Coastal Gathering. We'll also be later sharing clips from Fraser Salish and the Northern Gatherings when we go over the findings from each of those themes. So I'm just waiting for that to play. I hope it's not my job to play the video.
Maybe while we're just waiting for the video to be queued up, just extending our gratitude to those of you that are adding your comments and thoughts and suggestions in the chat, and just echoing Evan and Nell, that we're so grateful to be able to hear directly from you as well around your thoughts and reactions to the project and the findings, to inform our next steps forward. So thank you so much to those of you that are adding your thoughts in the chat.
Population health and wellness reporting cannot succeed unless it reflects a population's view of themselves through their own self-defined understanding of well-being. We Walk Together is a research project that seeks to develop new health indicators sourced from BC First Nations perspectives of wellness and connection to land, water, and territory.
First Nations Health Authority researchers use land-based activities and sharing circles to collect data related to 3 research questions. 1. What does Indigenous knowledge tell us about connection to land and water as a determinant of health and wellness? 2. What methods have First Nations communities traditionally used to measure and monitor land, water, and health? 3. How do we gather, privilege, and feature the knowledge and perspectives of First Nations knowledge keepers and community members to inform population health at a provincial scale?
Gatherings were held in 3 of BC's 5 health regions: Fraser Salish, Vancouver Coastal, and Northern.
Vancouver Coastal Region is comprised of 14 communities and 3 subregions: Central Coast, South Coast, and Southern Slatlium. 14 nations sent 2 representatives for a total of 28 participants who shared their experience and knowledge at the Vancouver Coastal Gathering.
3 overarching themes were identified: ancestral knowledge, land and water wellness, and accountability.
Ancestral knowledge is rooted in a relationship to land and territory, which forms the basis for personal and communal identity, purpose, spirituality, and ceremony, all of which were felt to be central to health and well-being.
My grandmother was about 101 or 2 when she passed. And I remember lying in bed with her and she'd be telling stories in our language. She left something behind, a teaching of how we have to have respect for everything we touch, we eat.
My spirit brings me back to a time when I can envision how our people used to work together. There was equality and responsibility of your own contribution towards your village. When the families would leave to go out and do the hunting, harvesting, the grandparents would look after the children.
I would have uncles, I would have cousins, I'd have my nanny right there, and that's where I learned our traditional foods.
We start our children off working 9 to 3, and we take them from the land before they even had a chance to be there. Then we move them on, they graduate, and we move them on to 9 to 5, and their spirit suffers because we never actually learned who that child is.
The stories of the residential school, the losses of identity, understanding that bit is a huge part of understanding how we're going to go forward.
The work is out here doing stuff like this. Once we get out of that mentality that you're not at work, if you're not inside that office sitting down behind a desk ready to answer my phone call.
Overwhelming grief from what's been lost and stolen. Reckoning with losses and finding a pathway to strength and wellness prompts questions for both the ancestors and future generations.
I have people telling me, how can you be so strong? And I think back to what our ancestors went through, so each and every one of us could be here today.
To me, our language incorporates our morals and values and disciplines. What are we going to do when we no longer have our language? Who are we? How do we uphold ourselves to our morals and our customs? How do we do that when we no longer walk our land? When it makes us who we are?
I'm a residential school survivor. I lost a lot of myself. One main thing is my language. The impact was so great that I never taught my children. I never taught my grandchildren either. That's always a sore spot for me, because I want them to know who they are and be proud of who they are.
I strongly believe in our traditions and our culture. I believe that's our true medicine. Doesn't matter what nation we come from. Eventually we all connect together.
I come from a place that I've had to grow up in, like she said, a concrete jungle. I can't hunt in my own territory. I can't go strip cedar in my own territory. I can't go bath in my own territory. If I want to do these things, if I want to heal myself and I want to feed myself and my family, I have to go elsewhere and go to other people's territory and ask them permission to go in their territory and use their territory so that I may bring things back to my family.
With the land, you know, we have to sneak around in our mountains at home to do our baths, and we have to sneak around. We have to ask the forestry for permission.
I really worry about all of the loss of our land, our territory. And that to me is the heart of health and wellness, is our connection to the land, our connection to the water, our connection to each other.
My dad was 59 years old when he had me. He was 62 years old when he had my youngest sister. I had 3 sisters go within a month due to cancer.
I was really good at telling people what to do and really good at telling people how to take care of themselves, but I wasn't taking care of myself. I had to break, away from thinking or acting or reacting.
I want to be a big part of managing our wellness, not our sickness.
I was telling my friend here, my sister, when she's ready to give herself the opportunity, it's going to come to her.
I think I realized the strength and the connection to our culture. There was a canoe gathering in Bella Bella, the Gotwas, and for the first time in my kids' lives, I stepped on a dance floor with them. And the power and the strength of that connection was a movement within myself and an awakening.
We're so connected to the Mother Earth, going out onto the land hunting, gathering, harvesting, utilizing all of that to go in and take care of our good health.
We catch our first fish, we hunt our first deer, all gets given away. Wow. We're passing knowledge on.
I started working on developing a art history curriculum for K-12, teaching our culture through art. And our children are so tech savvy. I would start the PowerPoint with little emojis like a colon bracket and LOL. And I taught them how to create stories through symbols, and then that moved into crests and what our crests mean and what they represent, and then telling stories through totems and teaching them the language of art.
If we follow the simple things our old people said, then our spirit's going to feel at home here, and that can be a medicine for your family and for your people.
And I believe that we do need to incorporate our traditional ways into everything that we have in our community.
What you're passionate about is what creates your spirit. No one will ever love and care for the things the way that we do ourselves.
The teachings from our class, our elders. Keep it going.
We need to pass that on. But we want to pass it on in a good way. That's why I said, I don't want to talk to you about my hurts and the things that have happened to me. What I want to talk about is the good things that our people did. taking them out to the land.
Land and water wellness. The wellness of the land and water is our wellness.
My healing came a lot with our tradition, our cedar, and our water, our kaya. It wasn't for our medicines that our ancestors left behind, I would not be here.
Standing by that river, going in the water, being in places that my ancestors have gone, has given me the strength to carry on, to continue going forward.
The laws of the land, the stewardship of the land. The Delgamuukw case says that oral history is represented through title and rights. If you have a story and a time and a place, you can connect those all together and have title and rights to that area. In the court of the land, the Supreme Court of the land, they won that case. It took them 20-something years to fight and win that case.
And we have a responsibility as Hualmuch Ot Misteo, as Indigenous people. We know in our histories and our stories, if it wasn't for our relatives with the fins and with the feathers and the ones that go on 4 legs, and we wouldn't be here today. And we have to give back.
How do we teach that respect to somebody who's coming in and tearing up the mountains? Nobody's ever going to be as passionate about it as we are because we're connected. That connection's been there since birth.
Growing up, I was taught that as long as the land is beautiful, we'll be beautiful. So we have to take care of our land.
I am the land, I am the water, I am the territory.
And when you look around the circle, we're all reflections of the land that we come from. Whether it's the mountains or the lakes or it's the rivers or it's the ocean, we reflect that in our language, in what we dress ourselves with, and with our understanding, because that all came from the earth.
I find that it's the connections with our land. When we walk on our land and when we learn our waters, that helps us to regain our spirit, to bring our spirit back.
My mom, she's the strongest person I've ever known. She's a survivor of many trauma in her life. Whenever her blood pressure was giving her a hard time and she'd feel her heart just moving, she'd tell her grandchildren, go up and get me some Devil's Club.
We have cancers, we have diabetes, we have all different types of illnesses and stress related to how we eat and our lifestyle. Medicine as food and food as medicine. We go out in the woods and we find our nodding onion and our garlics and that, and we explain this is what is cleansing our body.
And I believe that the medicines come at a time when you need it the most. I was amazed when I just really started to collect more and more food, collect more and more medicines as I went along. The first one I noticed was the rosehip. It's ripe right when everybody's getting sick.
I really believe in our ways. The laws of the land, I think, are really key. That's fundamental to everything that we do in the work that I do.
We talk about cancer, diabetes, and all the other sicknesses that come along. And we wonder why we keep getting sick. But we were able to fish, we were able to hunt, we were able to do all that stuff before. And now we're surrounded by nothing but high buildings.
Accountability. Taking actionable steps towards addressing what's shared between First Nations and other institutions.
I think that when we're advertising a job, that it should say right in the advertisement that you're going to be coming to a First Nations community. Are you willing to respect that we're First Nations people and we have traditional ways?
We have knowledge keepers, we have medicine walkers. It's accepting that and bringing it in and using it all.
And that's what I want for each and every one of us, is the strength, the resilience to be who you can be.
Some of our kids that are going to those schools 9 to 3 they're not productive there. But once we take them to the mountains, they flourish. That's their truth. That's who they are. That's their identity. That's their spirit.
I'm a weaver, I'm a beater, and I just told my aunt yesterday that everything that I do, I want it to be done right. So if something comes out on my work that doesn't look right to me, I have to pull it apart. But that pulling it apart gives me that better understanding of how to put it back together.
Some of our elders who have passed on, and us wanting to teach our own children, we're sharing our knowledge with each other. We're going out into the woods and we're harvesting the pitch, or we're talking about the medicines, and our kids are coming in and we're teaching our kids how to work on the deer together or work on the fish together.
Each one of you are healers in your own way. We don't ask for payment or anything, because this is the way. If somebody's mad at you, still go help them.
You know, we need to continue to be strong. And we can only do that through our culture, with our connection to the land, our tradition, our culture, our identity.
I go, I work on my art, I do my carving. That's my time. That's how I feed my spirit, and that's how I stay healthy for everybody. Don't wait for anybody to set you free. You set yourself free, and you'll be well. Support your friends, support your family, the things that they love.
Let's discuss our next steps towards creating a new measure of First Nations health.
That was the video from the Vancouver Coastal Gathering and the work that went on in that region. I want to thank all of the participants in all the gatherings in all three regions. And as Evan shared earlier, all of the videos are available for viewing on the First Nations Health Authority YouTube channel. And before we move on to the reflections, I want to let everyone know who's attending this webinar that all of your comments and questions in the chat and in the Q&A are being looked at and are gratefully received. And if it's a question, we'll do our best to get back to you either live during this webinar or later on after the webinar ends. There was the gathering that you saw in that particular video was held at the Tatzel Learning Center in Lilwat. So we'll move on now, and I'm just going to turn it back to Elder Siamith to just have some reflections on the video that she saw and whether she has anything she wants to add at this time.
It was good to be able to hear all of the things that the people shared. It all goes along to where we were really lost. We had lost everything, and our souls were empty. And in order for us to get back good feelings into our hearts and our souls, we really need to go back to who we are and where we come from. As a few of them mentioned, we are the land. And everything, that helps us in a personal way really does come from the land and our connection to everything that our Creator gave to us. As I mentioned in the prayer, every blade of the grass, right to all of the food that He created in order for us to consume and satisfy our souls, as well as giving us strength and energy. It is so sad, that through all of the colonialism that our people, had their lives taken away. And you see our elders, really crying within themselves about everything that we lost. Our language, our culture, our spirituality, and and it leads to much sickness within a person, when all of that hope is taken away from us by taking away everything, that meant so much to us. I believe strongly, and I firmly believe, that culture and spirituality is the foundation of who we are, and that we need to be able to find those ways in order for us to fulfill that feeling within us. And it's going back to the teachings, that our ancestors got. And they got it directly from who we call here Chels, which means God. And all of the ways that the Creator gave to us, to sustain ourselves. When all of that is lost, when those feelings of each of us, how we feel about ourselves gets passed on to the next generations. And how are they to learn? How are they to be who they are? It all begins with us. And it's so good to be able to hear and to see the revival of our ways, how much the water means to us. When in what our Coast Salish ways, the longhouses to run from the last part of October until the beginning of March, or in that area. And our people they go to the water in order to help us to be strong against all evil, and strong physically, mentally, and we really depend on that. And as soon as the longhouse season is finished, and then they start going out on the canoes. So, being involved in those kinds of things, there's really no room for alcohol and drugs. And that's what we need in those gatherings. It's bringing families together, bringing nations together, and we're able to support each other in really picking up the ways of our past, where they all was good, for our ancestors, before colonization set in. And those were just also so opposite of who we are, and where many abuses took place. And it's so difficult to deal with all of those abuses. It all depends on teachings and family beliefs, to be able to pass on some good teachings to help them stay on the straight and narrow. But today, there's just so much out there in this world. So many people are being taken because of alcohol and drugs. We have far too many funerals, people passing before their time. And that's because they haven't been able to find their ways back to the way our ancestors were able to live their lives. So through all of the activities, that we can create to teach our young people, the next generations, how to believe in themselves. It's only by us coming together all the time and finding out these new ways. Every nation has a different way. They have a different culture. But that culture, really means a lot to our people. If we can be proud of who we are, we can keep moving forward. But many get trapped. I work in a healing village right now, and it's called OPHO, a place where we gather medicines. And this is what we teach here. We have the water, we have the mountains, we have the trees, we have the longhouse here. And the residents who come here are able to live as families. And our hope is that, that they can live good lives as families and come together as a community. And we have many ceremonies. We use the ceremonies of our own ways because it's the only ways we know here in Coast Salish. And they can take that and modify it and bring it back to where they come from. Because some people come here, there's one way from Newfoundland, and there's some from, lots from Saskatchewan, Ontario, Edmonton, Alberta, there's just so many different people here. But they can take what they learn from here to live each day to its fullest, remembering who they are and how they can practice these ways and be able to bring it back to their own communities. And that's what we need, to have that strength, to have that courage, and truly believe in who we are as an individual. And if we can branch out to others, who can be strong in that same way, then they can go back and really bring that back to their homes and their communities. Yeah, so, that kind of wraps up everything. The one that just told their stories earlier, we need to stand together. We need to keep moving forward together, and demonstrate who we are and how strong we can be. Yeah. The one thing we really learned, coming from residential school, for some of us, became really resilient. In spite of all the difficulties, we just keep on going. Don't let those words or criticisms get to us. We have to just keep going. OCMO, all my relations.
Thank you so much, Elder Siamic. I think I speak on behalf of the hundreds of people that are on this webinar, thanking you for your words, and we're so grateful to have you with us in those teachings. We really appreciate it. Before I turn it over to Dr. Daniel Bain-Smith, I just want to acknowledge all of the comments coming in on the chats and the Q&A. There's some really thoughtful, really thoughtful observations in there that we will for sure spend some time considering, including most recently comments from Navana Edwards Point and Dr. Sheila Blackstock, who's on our webinar, who is the chair of the First Nations Health Authority Board of Directors. And we're really grateful to have Dr. Sheila with us here today as well. I think at this point, we'll turn it over to Dr. Danielle Bainsmith.
Masi, Nell, thank you so much. And thank you again for the teachings, Elder Virginia. It was so nice to watch the video again just now from the Vancouver Coastal Gathering and just remember and be so grateful for the opportunity to participate. I got to participate in 2 of the 3 gatherings, and it was so grounding. And as you can see from that one video, and the 2 others are equally rich, and the conversations were just as as illuminating. And it was incredible to meet with so many different elders and youth and have the same, sometimes the exact same words actually said across different nations, across different territories. We are the land. If we take care of the land, it will take care of us, which is something that my grandparents taught us as well. So it was really affirming and nice to watch that just now. So what I'm going to do for my portion of the webinar today is just walk through some of the, or through the 3 key themes, and then invite participants, and specifically invite First Nations participants, to give us your thoughts or your sense of how some of the proposed measures resonate for you or not. Spoiler alert is that we have not yet landed on one or a constellation of indicators that we think really captures these 3 themes perfectly. That would be a really big feat. But we are going to share with you the themes, and then also some measures that currently exist in the landscape of First Nations health here in BC that may be able to be used to help us track over time. So the themes again that came across were this idea of ancestral knowledge and knowledge passed down from our ancestors. Land and water wellness, the wellness of the land and water is our wellness because we are the land and the water. And accountability, this kept coming back, this need to take clear actions and track our progress towards addressing what is shared, and also the colonial harms that continue to perpetuate harms on us. And so we do think that we are able to see some measures that might be able to track some of these, and we'll get into those in just a moment. I think that Evan mentioned it at the beginning as part of that whole constellation of population health and wellness agenda, that we were also holding space for self-determination, recognizing that that's a key root of our wellness. And so we really see this theme of accountability as being tightly knit to self-determination as well. So we're going to share some thoughts there. Although, you know, our work between the Office of the Chief Medical Officer and the Office of the Provincial Health Officer is provincial in scope, the intention is to continue for FNHA to work with regional teams and engage with communities to help them determine priorities for wellness indicators at the regional or nation level, and that ideally we could roll that up to get that provincial level picture. So the first theme was ancestral knowledge, and that was described as knowledge passed down from our ancestors. Elders, knowledge keepers, and youth shared their cultural protocols and practices, which was such a gift to participate in. There was a lot of description, and we heard that in the video just now as well, of the disruption to cultural protocols and practices as a deliberate result of colonialism. And then this overwhelming grief that we carry over what's been stolen and what's been lost because of that disruption. And yet I think it was quite apparent in that video as well that while we hold that grief and that heaviness, we also have this tremendous resilience and strength. And so there was a lot of discussion about that cultural resurgence. And that's what Elder Virginia was just talking about just now, and that that is the path to healing, is what's happening in community and reclaiming our ways of knowing and being. And I think I'm going to pass it back to the team now to show a brief clip from the gathering that was on Stolo territory.
Now we see those kinds of changes where the kids don't have to be ashamed of themselves. They carry themselves with pride and dignity, put on the regalia, go to the longhouses where they can get the teachings. Today we see all of our younger ones going on further, and how we get to have that is that we really need to know ourselves. We need to know where we come from. Enjoy the teachings of the past so that our present could be strong. Our future we will have hope. It's so great to see those little ones dancing, not being afraid.
Must see. Thank you so much for that. I agree. That to me is some of the best medicine always, is seeing the little ones dancing and singing in their language. It's always such a gift. And so as we looked, reflected on what we had heard through that deep listening and through the gatherings, and then looked out again into the sphere of what might be available as potential data sources, we were really pleased to see that the First Nations Regional Health Survey has began including a question that may be useful in this area. And so we're thinking about using responses to the Regional Health Survey question on how many BC First Nations have had the opportunity to harvest and gather traditional foods as a measure of how many people are able to access the land and develop land-based knowledge. So that's a development that has occurred since we began this task of trying to imagine the population health and wellness agenda. Actually 10 years ago, probably to this month, I think, is when we started the overarching PHWA. So amazing to think that it's been 10 years. And another major area that was identified where connection to land is being promoted is through the land-based healing initiatives that are supported by FNHA's traditional wellness team. And so this program has been providing more funding every year to communities in BC. There have been 151 recipients so far, mostly BC First Nations communities that have received the funding. And there is some work underway to pilot a process to interview community partners to see how the program's progressing. And so we're also considering looking at the number of land-based healing initiatives that are funded and operating each year, and whether funders, such as the government, are maintaining or increasing the overall funding to meet community needs. And so I think at this point, the admin team on the other side is going to be giving access to a poll. And so again, we're specifically looking for perspectives from First Nations people because this is a First Nations led initiative. So we would really appreciate you filling out the poll and giving us a sense of how these potential measures land or don't for you. And there will be an opportunity to dialogue about the measures a little bit later on in the webinar. But we just want to hear from First Nations participants to help inform our direction. So we'll give you a couple minutes to fill out the poll. I wonder if there's anyone on the admin team that can tell me if it looks like everything's working and it's okay to move on to the next section? Yep. Thank you. I've got two screens going, so it's like being cross-eyed.
I think they're just starting to come in stronger now.
Okay, we'll give it another minute.
Yeah. Yeah, still going up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we might be okay there. It looks like it's kind of slowed down now.
Down. Okay. Thanks, Lena. So the second major theme that emerged across all the gatherings was land and water wellness, and that we are all connected, and the wellness of the land and water is our wellness. And even though we've got in brackets First Nations peoples, I think what really struck me was the commitment and the generosity of all the places we visited, is the idea that we really, as First Nations people, carry in our hearts and our spirits our rights and responsibilities to care for the lands and waters, not just for ourselves, but for future generations, including everyone that shares these lands now. And so that really came across strongly. And so during the gatherings, elders, knowledge keepers, and youth shared their knowledge of and relationships to lands, waters, and territories. And there were many things that came across, especially concerns about contamination, destruction caused by industrial activity or urban development, climate change, and different barriers to accessing their own lands or our own lands. And that this has really reduced many people's ability to access traditional foods and medicines, and has negatively impacted health and wellness as a direct result of colonialism and impacts to land. And so what came across really loud and clear was the need for First Nations jurisdiction and for our rights to be upheld and respected, to be able to carry out our responsibilities and care for our own lands and waters in our own ways. So again, we're going to share another clip from the Northern Gathering to hear directly from participants in that area.
A lot of our char are bottom feeders, and what I'm concerned about is all of a sudden our people started getting cancer, and a lot of us drink from Babine Lake, the water, and to us it's spiritually, we used to say it builds us up, it makes us strong. A lot of our
Thanks, Lena. I hope everyone will get a chance to go and watch the other two videos as well. They're so, they're just so wonderful and rich, and so many important teachings and knowledge that was really generously shared with us. So participants made it super clear, everyone at the gathering, that the wellness of the land and water is also our wellness, and this is a foundational determinant of health that needs to be measured. And we see that actually already today in the chat. There's many people on the call today that are saying the exact same thing, so that is very affirming. Extreme temperatures, forest fires, floods have all had significant impacts on our health as First Nations people here in BC, but it also has impacted food, medicines that we rely on for nourishment and wellness, and our more than human relatives that live on those lands and waters. So we've been looking at both mainstream quantitative measures and First Nations qualitative measures to track those physical changes that we can observe, as well as First Nations community perspectives to understand direct experiences on the ground. So on this first slide, what you're seeing are some potential data sources that are more related to the quantitative measures. And so the BC government collects a wealth of data related to key aspects of land and water health. So there's a cumulative effects framework that looks at past, present, and future human activities on the health of the environment and tracks things such as habitat loss, maps of extreme weather events like drought. There's also the BC wildfire data and environmental indicators measured through Environment and Climate Change Canada, including biodiversity and species at risk and temperature and precipitation changes. So that's some of the quantitative data that is available. And then thinking about other ways to measure land and water wellness, we found a more strengths-based data source for the tripartite framework agreement on nature conservation between First Nations Leadership Council, BC, and Canada. So they have an annual report which reports on habitat and ecosystem conservation, so the area of land under permanent protection, habitat enhancement and restoration, and then again, species at risk protection, as well as information sharing and the number of Indigenous knowledge systems that are integrated into monitoring, community-based monitoring initiatives as well, such as Indigenous Guardians. And then the FNHA Climate Health Action Program reporting and that team's relationships with communities has descriptions of land and water related changes and issues and actions from communities, which are of course very strong indicators that reflect BC First Nations perspectives on the health of their lands and waters. And so again, we're going to put up a poll and inviting First Nations people in the audience to fill out the poll for potential or proposed land and water wellness measures. And so you'll see that there's some questions there that you can respond to. And again, there'll be some time in the dialogue.
I'll see you when I get home.
We're still getting responses going up. We're at 28:30s now. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So.
Do you think it's a good time to move on, Lena? How's it looking?
Yeah, we're back in the 60s again, so it's getting close. Yeah, it's still going up.
Awesome. This really feels like Christmas in July, I think, for our team. And I'm getting an update oh my gosh. The government of BC says that it may just turn off my device at 3:28 p.m. So I'll finish talking, and if I get logged off, I'll try and log back in, friends. I'm being
I think we're good now.
yeah, okay. Of course, those messages always pop up at the most awkward times. So yeah, this is really so from the bottom of my heart from the team. There have been so many people that have contributed countless hours to this project and this work, and it really means a lot to us to be able to share the findings today and what we heard, but also to get that feedback and direction in terms of where we go next. And so the final theme, if that slide comes up, was accountability. And the knowledge keepers, elders, and the youth were so clear to us that we need to be accountable to each other and we need to move forward together in reconciliation. And they asked us and directed us to pass on this message and ensure that the work that's being done ultimately benefits communities and nations. And so we heard about the need for healing in communities, for reciprocity, for support to heal lands and protect food and medicine sources, and to uphold self-determination. This work was done before the pandemic, and so it's been drawn out somewhat, but that space has actually allowed the landscape to shift somewhat. And so, as everyone on the webinar is likely aware, in 2019, the province of British Columbia was the first jurisdiction to pass the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act into law. And then in 2021, the Canadian government passed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act into law. So we're in a very different landscape now, legislatively, legally, with those Western legal levers in terms of First Nations self-determination and governance. Than we were when we were, again, conceiving of how are we going to track our wellness and self-determination and connection to land back in 2015, 2016. So now we've got these legislative pieces or levers that ensure that laws need to align with UNDRIP, that there's an implementation and an action plan, and the development of annual reports on progress. So we have new data sources that were not available to us at the outset of this work. And so I'm going to pass it back to the team to show one final clip.
All our trout too, some of them we catch up there, they're all sick too, and help us with this lake down here to clean it out for my daughter and her kids, and my daughter's kids for down the line.
We don't look for trouble. It's the things that's so right have to be done in a good way for my grandkids, for their grandkids, for everybody's grandkids on this earth.
Money will be well spent if you can open up the highways and all your teaching to hit home.
We do need a lot of help with our traditional things that we have to teach the young ones.
People come first, our elders come first. We've got to protect everything for them, that live a better life than what we grew up with.
Thanks. Thank you, Lena. So again, accountability is really thinking through what's needed from all of us to move forward for the benefit of future generations. And the best sources that we've found so far as potential data sources for tracking government's progress in advancing First Nations land and water stewardship are annual reports from both the provincial and federal governments. And so, again, these did not exist prior to and when we were doing this work. So these have just become available. But we are particularly interested in this Action 2.06, which is going to be tracking the co-development of strategic level policies, programs, and initiatives to advance collaborative stewardship of the environment, land, and resources that address cumulative effects and respects Indigenous knowledge. And then 2.07, which is to collaborate with First Nations to develop and implement strategies, plans, and initiatives for sustainable water management, and to identify policy or legislative reforms supporting Indigenous water stewardship, including shared decision-making. So in this annual report, the actions are rated in the extent of the completion, so all the way from started or perhaps not yet started to completed, and then also acknowledges complexity and challenges and a level of engagement. So those seem like promising actions that we can track as a part of that holistic First Nations population health and wellness agenda, which we think have some promise. And then on the federal side, there is also the UNDA, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and the Government of Canada is producing yearly progress reports looking at shared priorities relevant to self-determination and First Nations governance over land and water. And so this will give updates on progress of shared priority actions and descriptive updates to lands, territories, resources, agreements, and capacity building. So again, this is going to be tracked by progress status. So how far along the implementation is, consultation and cooperation. So the extent and whether that happened with First Nations in that reporting cycle or that reporting year. So these are a couple of potential data sources in the vein of exploring accountability, in the vein of how, to what extent are our inherent rights to self-determination being upheld. And so this will be one last poll to get a sense of how these are resonating for you or not, and then also the opportunity for you to share if you've got ideas on other potential data sources that we haven't thought of yet, to please add that in the text box. And yeah, and then I think that will conclude my section. So after the poll, I'll pass it back over to Nell, and apologies in advance if the government of BC kicks me off my computer. I will rejoin on a different device if that happens. Masicho.
Okay, it looks like might have reached. Oh, no, it's going up. Okay. Think that we can call it. Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you to everybody who participated in the polls. When we scheduled this town hall, we realized that 2 to 4 p.m. is kind of a sleepy, nappy time for people. So we thought the polls would be a great way to keep you engaged and get some feedback. But now is the time you've all been waiting for, which is the open discussion where we're happy to take questions and have a discussion for the next. I think we have about 30 minutes for discussion. So if anyone has a question they'd like to ask, and if you have a question, please identify yourself and where you're from. And if there's a particular person you'd like to direct the question to as well, that would be helpful. And if you're too shy to put up your hand and ask a question, you can keep using the chat function and also the Q&A. But Heather has bravely stepped up to be the first question. So Heather, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Heather Psulich, and I'm gratefully calling in from the Tsimshian territory of the Kitsilist and Kitsikalelam, and the chosen home of the BC Northwest Métis First Nations Association. And I currently am employed by Northern Health and work in public health practice. And Danielle, I had the opportunity to hear you speak at our First Nations Health Authority and Northern Health Immunization Forum in May. It was very engaging, and it is part of what spurred me to join today's meeting. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts about how what's being shared at today's webinar could be talked about further in my department, in my organization, and from a lens of the unlearning, your unlearning club that you noted. We're just doing a lot of work in our department on truth and reconciliation and how we can be collaborative and how we can bring teachings and learnings into the everyday work that we do.
Yeah, thanks, Heather, for the question, and thanks for for attending that session in Prince George. I think actually I saw maybe in the chat that I think it was Sandra was also commenting on the importance of being anti-racist and how critical that is to the work. So I think for me, what you're raising or speaking into the room is this idea that the work that we're talking about today and the findings that we're talking about today aren't happening in a vacuum, but actually are contextual and are, also there's other systems at play that that impact our health and wellness. And so how can folks in the broader health system contribute? And I think it really does come back to the fundamentals of truth, and just coming back to those fundamentals of truth, both in the past, but also today in terms of primarily, I think it is about structures and governance. We wouldn't even have the need for this webinar today, I don't think, if we truly had nation to nation relations where our sovereignty as First Nations was fully upheld and respected. And we just don't have that resetting of the relationship yet. So I think as individuals, probably the thing that's most helpful to contribute to this overall objective is to get local in your learning, right? We heard that so much about in the gatherings about our identities, who we are, our laws, our systems are in our lands, in our waters, in our language. And so as people who occupy other people's territories, and I count myself as one of those people. I live on Lekwungen with my family, and so I have learning to do as well about the original inhabitants of these territories that I occupy. So I think we all can engage in that learning and learn how to be good guests on those territories and how to join those territories in their active resistance and in their ongoing fight to uphold their rights and responsibilities. And my computer is like literally flashing. I'm getting the hook from my own computer. So I'll pause there and try to figure out how to stay on the line and see if Nell or Evan have anything they wanted to add.
Nell, I see you off mute. I thought.
I
And
was
you're so far.
I was unmuted, so I'll let you go first. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. And I have just recently been a guest in someone else's traditional territory, and it really means being very humble and saying, "This is not my world. I'm a guest here. I need to do some deep listening." And it also means admitting that, some of the time I don't know what they're talking about. When they're talking about their own lands and territory in Hawaii, they'll use a word, kamaina, and I'll be like, what does that mean? And I can't center myself. I can't center my foreignness. I just have to let it go and say, I don't know what that word is. I don't know what that concept that they're talking about is. I don't know this place. It's my first time here. And to really be humble, be a good ally. And as a man who tries to be a feminist, it's really the same idea. I was literally in a meeting with people of color, and they invited along a white participant. He literally sat in the middle of the room, and every time a brown person or a black person spoke, he would say, "Oh, well, here's what I think about what you just said." And he took up more than half the time of all of those participants. And that's exactly, I think, the wrong approach. So thanks for starting us off, Danielle. I hope I've added to that. I think it is humility and respect as an ally. Thanks.
Thanks, Evan and Danielle. I think the one observation that I will make is how everyone has their own personal journey, their own story, their own connection to the land. And I've seen a couple of comments in the Q&A and in the chat about people who are disconnected through no fault of their own, either having been a residential school survivor or like myself. I'm a 60 scoop survivor. I was adopted out of my traditional territory, and over the course of my life, I've moved to different territories. And I'm originally from Manitoba, but I spent most of my young adulthood in Ontario, and now I've made my home here on Coast Salish territory. And so, how does that figure in? I guess I asked that question, and I've seen it reflected in the chat from people about, how will we as part of this project, hear those kinds of stories from people who have been disconnected, and then how do communities play a role in welcoming people back home, or in the small ways that, I've been welcomed into this territory by different people. For example, most recently, a couple of months ago, by an elder from the Squamish Nation who very movingly sort of welcomed me and acknowledged sort of my lived experience. So I think that's kind of another interesting angle. And just in the nick of time, Kate Walker has raised their hand. So we'll turn to Kate for their question. Kate, please go ahead. You'll have to unmute.
I didn't. I hit raise hand by mistake. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I was looking. I was looking for something else. Okay.
Kate, that's perfectly fine. All of these webinars and town halls, take place live, and so there's always room for everybody to have a voice, but also understanding and grace when we have technical difficulties, of course. So we will take Kate's hand down and look whether or not anyone else has raised their hand. I think it says one other raised hand. We're just searching out who that is. Tony. And then Clinton. So first we'll hear from Tony. Tony, please go ahead.
Awesome. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. Hadi, everyone, Tony Carlton, joining you from Sioux Nation, Sauk, just down the road from you, Dr. Smith. Question, I know this is at a more of a provincial public health level, but just wondering what you learned along the way about implementation of some of these indicators, like at local levels. The work I do is around, youth wellness, and we're keenly interested in how Indigenous knowledges and Western knowledges come together to look at, youth and community wellness, but it's so different within all communities across the province. So one of the questions we have to come back to is around these types of indicators and local implementation, I think.
Tony, and I guess I'm wondering whether Danielle or Evan, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I don't mind kicking it off, and then I've managed to restart my computer, so I'm on my phone. I'll try and pivot back after this, but thanks, Tony, and nice to meet you. I think this is a constant tension that we face in our work and around tracking progress. And so I think there's like these parallel streams of work that need to be rolling out together in ways that are coherent and consistent, because ultimately, the information and that tracking is happening and has always happened within communities and in nations. So there's a need to bolster and kind of make sure that any colonial impediments or barriers to nations and leadership being able to kind of track their own health and wellness, that we keep working at dismantling those. And so, although not related to this project, during COVID, things became really vivid to us about how many, we call them colonial knots, are still in our way and in the way of First Nations leaders and communities to track their own wellness for their own, community members. And I think still having this provincial level tracking is really, really helpful in the sense that there are, and it emerged in the We Walk Together findings as well, that there's actually these common racist policies or structures or scenarios that play out time and again at a provincial level. So having everything rolled up so that you can reflect that back to the systems, not necessarily about our health and wellness, but it's about tracking the policies and structures and norms and values of the province or different areas, so that we can have a better sense of like diagnosing the problem right at that systems level. So I think both types of work need to be happening simultaneously, and it's tricky. So maybe I'll leave my response there, because I think Evan and Nell probably have a clearer sight line in terms of the work that's happening within the regions. I'll leave it there and try and move back over to the other device.
Yeah, please go ahead, Nell.
Thanks, Evan. Well, I think to add on really briefly, I mean, it is true that we're kind of caught in this we want to be able, for example, the whole goal of the We Walk Together project is to hopefully develop indicators that we can use in our role in the OCMO as reporting in partnership with the OPHO in reporting back on the health and wellness of First Nations people. And as Danielle, I think, said at the very beginning of our webinar, you know, we're kind of, or Evan, I guess, did at the beginning, you know, confined initially to these very Western-based public health indicators that are often very kind of deficit-based and like a measurement of infant mortality, for example, has a certain kind of tenor to it, whereas connection to land, self-determination, things like that are both grounded in First Nations knowledge and ways of knowing and being, but are very much more part of that respecting ancestral knowledge and contemporary knowledge, including of our elders and our young people, to get a different perspective on how First Nations people view their health and wellness. And so there's that need, and we heard it. I really do hope people have an opportunity to see all three videos, because they are similar themes, but there are different perspectives in the different regions that were captured in the videos. And that's the same for all 5 regions. And then when you break it down into the family groups and particular nations. And so how do we balance that need to provide a more eagle-eye view of what's going on? Because it is true. We and others at FNHA, including our CEO, Monica McAuliffe, we use the data from the Population Health and Wellness Agenda in our advocacy. So advocacy for change in policy, for funding, for example, that's very valuable. And at the same time, then we have to telescope down and try to be mindful and hear what's being said at the individual community levels. And we have so many, right? We have 200 plus First Nations communities in this province. So trying to respect both ways. And eventually we hope, I think, I don't want to speak for Danielle and Evan, who really are the co-leads of this project, but we hope to land on some indicators that we will, for the purposes of the Population Health and Wellness Agenda and our advocacy efforts here at FNHA, hope to further refine sort of at least the 2 aspects that we've been talking about today, which is connection to land and self-determination.
Great. And I'll just add that, what I learned is I have so much respect for traditional knowledge transmission. And I really loved hearing from knowledge keepers about their own lands and territories. And I thought, why do I have to be the one reporting when they can say it so well themselves? And we've tried to capture that. And I hope you liked what you saw. I almost felt like I was sitting at their feet and hearing from them. I was so tearful, again, hearing from them. And again, that feeling of, I don't quite know what they mean. Like I have to keep going back again and again and again and again, probably till the end of my days, trying to figure out what exactly that meant. And so even like the realization of how much sadness and despair people are feeling about the state of their territories and waters was so it was such a surprise how they spoke to it. Anyway, I'm glad that we've captured that. I have learned to trust informants way more. And yeah, why do I have to reinterpret what they say? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Though I guess once in a while I do have to try. Like when my boss says, "What's happening out there?" I will try and paraphrase. But it is nice just to say, wow, we had a great time. Let's talk about all of that stuff that seemed to come up. It's, rather than reviewing water quality values through 13.1, and I'm so excited now, here's a 16. It should be more like, here are some of the themes and the sub-themes, and, here are some of the most memorable things I heard from knowledge keepers. That to me is way more informative. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I will just let Clinton know that I see your hand up. and we will turn to you in a minute or so. There was a question that was posed in the Q&A section of the Zoom, so I'll just turn to that one. Partly because Danielle, you have proven yourself to be very resilient and have gone between your computer and your phone. So you're with us because there was a question from Marianne Anna Voldson, and I hope I said that correctly. What is the BC government's commitment to this work? And I think because of your role within the Office of the Provincial Health Officer, we don't want to put all the pressure on and you have to answer for the BC government, but given where you're situated, maybe you have a little bit of a perspective on where the BC government sits with this.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it really is, it's where the rubber meets the road, I guess. So the BC government has made bold statements. They've passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and still across the entire government, across every ministry, across our office, which is a small office, independent office, loosely tied to the Ministry of Health. Like, I think the work that is before this province and this government is to demonstrate trustworthiness and to be consistent, coherent, and conscientious, those 3 words from Jody Wilson-Raybould's True Reconciliation book. And so I think that we've seen areas of like tremendous progress that are, I had an opportunity earlier today through a colleague to look at some work that's being done by Health Emergency Management BC, and I was floored. It was like so grounded and so clearly trying to create processes to have the default be like an emergency happens or we're thinking about planning for an emergency. Who are the Indigenous leaders that we need to be in touch with, like from right out of the gate? So that was incredibly heartening to see. And then we see other actions like Bill 14 and 15, where that's going against the stated commitments. So I think it's not a black or white. I don't think we can comment as a whole, but from where I sit, I see pockets of really encouraging work that are unfolding. And then I also see areas where, there's a lack of coherence, like what you're saying that you want to uphold our rights, but then what is happening in policy, practice, or legislation doesn't match yet. So overall, I would say I'm hopeful, and I believe that systemic white supremacy and Indigenous specific racism is deeply embedded in the foundation and creation of this province. And that was done by design very deliberately. And it's going to take a lot of sustained action and deliberate unlearning and undoing of that white supremacy and racism to make meaningful progress. And I think, we've stated it already, but it's probably worth stating again that this is for all of us. Every single one of us relies on, the lands and the waters. That is foundational to everybody's health and wellness. So the work that we're doing and the advocacy that we're doing and the resistance that we are putting up, that's for everybody. It's not for us as individuals or just our families or our nations. It really is about the health of all. So one will hope that those pockets of promising practice will continue to, filter through government.
Great, thank you so much, Danielle. And I think at this point we'll turn to Clinton Cuzio for their question. Clinton, please go ahead if you're able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I guess my question is to, segue from what Dr. Adams was saying about honoring traditional knowledge. And I was wondering, leaning into the traditional knowledge that all of you have, what is it that my question is like, in the spirit of sharing, and this is for anyone, if you could like lean into something that you know from your parents that you've been taught about your people and about the land and water that you hold dear and that has guided you in all of your work, and you so wish other people held that value if they just knew this thing. You know, I wonder if any of you have a story in mind that you could share.
Evan and Danielle, I think I'll turn to both or either of you for this one.
I can start, sure. Yeah, my dad would make me swim in the river and in the oceans in the middle of winter. I thought he was crazy. I was a little boy and I didn't see other families. I didn't see other little boys jumping in the water. And and he said, he would say, go. Like, you're not going to die. It's mind over matter. Recently, I was on Kaho'olawe, a beautiful Hawaiian island that they are reclaiming and is incredibly wild. And they made me sleep on the rocks. Literally, I slept on rocks. And I thought this is going to be the worst night of my life, but I actually slept pretty well. I think being on the land is maybe a little less comfortable than sitting on the couch. But I think being on the couch gives you a safety in a certain way, but it also gives you a certain risk of being disconnected and being overly comfortable and maybe lazy. So I remember my dad constantly, he's gone now. And I think of the tremendous love that he had for lands and waters. I think that was the best example. That and saying, yeah, it's way easier to be on the couch, but get out there. It has so many paybacks. Thanks for the question. So nice to hear it.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question, Clinton. And I wonder if you have something in your mind as well. I would say, I mean, even when you asked the question, it just made me immediately tear up because the teachings that we carry are so beautiful and they're so sacred, like what our ancestors held for us. And thinking about all of the people, to Virginia's point earlier, and all of those beautiful elders on the video who talked about, what they went through, the risks that they took, the harms that they endured to make sure that those teachings were passed along. I'm so grateful. And my daily prayer is that I can live up to that and be a good ancestor and a good descendant as well. So I think that's part of the teaching that was instilled in me from my dad as well. Just that, you walk in the world, you've got to tread softly and do your best to be a good ancestor, a good descendant. And I think part of that, Evan just spoke to it too, is like this deep teaching of love, like love for oneself, which means living your life in a wellness sort of way, love for everything around you, your more than human relatives, and that part of that expression of love is taking only what you need. If there were a teaching that I wish we could just kind of spark to our, all of our settler neighbors that who I believe had those teachings as well. I think, probably 7 generations or maybe more than that. But at one point, I think everybody shared those universal teachings to be reminded of that. Just, take only what you need. And that would help to restore the balance that's been disrupted. So yeah, Masi Cho, what a beautiful question. And if you have something that you would like to share, please.
Can you hear me still? Oh, yeah. Just very briefly, the one thing my dad taught me all the time was to listen to the land, to pay attention to the animals, to nature, and that you will get answers, you will hear things. And there was truth in that that no one else, there's no white person that's ever going to teach you that in the school. And he also, the flip side of that, he taught me to never listen to conservation officers, DFO, all of these people. He taught me such a healthy disrespect for their authority, so that even when we put him to rest in the national park, the local parks rangers came to give us a talking to because I had to cut some trees down to get around a fence, and I shooed them away basically in the spirit of my dad, and it all worked out. So no one was arrested, and we got the whole thing well.
Thanks for that, Clinton. When you were briefly on screen, I saw your photo, which is actually not a photo of yourself. It says Rage Against the Machine. So I think we had the sense you were a bit of a firecracker when you had that picture. So we have one more hand up, and I'm just looking at the time. So we will turn to Richard Joseph. Please, with your question, if you can unmute yourself, please go ahead.
I think it's funny that Dr. Evan Adams used the word crazy. It's something that I find really hard, and you might have heard me speaking on the video in terms saying 9 to 3 and 9 to 5 and everything like that. That's the world we're meant to grow up in, and we grow up in a more academic world where we're meant to refer to a great bunch of textbooks and to find the one answer that everybody else has in this world. And but when we're talking about the language of the land, that's when people start making you feel crazy. I go out under the land and I make my offering, and people wonder what you're doing, why you doing that, why you putting water there, why you placing tobacco, why you smudging, why you singing, and then you start explaining why it is that you do that, and you can see the looks on some people's faces because they haven't received any of the teachings. So how do we go about teaching the language of the land if you've not received them, and you've been meant to feel crazy? So, the one answer in the textbook just doesn't align with the traditional values. But also on the other hand, or to them, how I'm speaking right now, it doesn't line up with the textbook. It doesn't line up with anything that's academic out there. But you can go to school forever and never really truly be in touch with anything. To me, I'm always trying to be even more on the land than I was yesterday. And my household is 100% traditional tea, and we're about 65% on medicine and 45% on food, and it all makes perfect sense to me. But on my nation here, I'm chief in Liwat Nation. Well, it's even there. You have 2,300 people that you're trying to share this to, but you're competing against school because they've gone to daycare and they've gone to preschool and they've gone to all these schools, and they've never ever had the chance to be on the land. They only taught to be fearful of it. We're scared of wolves and bears and cougars, but that's not what we learn. I was out with my grandmother mushroom picking, and we're asking her about mushrooms, and how were you taught about the good ones and the bad ones? And she said, there is no bad ones. Everything that the world says is poisonous is actually the mother's food. The mother is strong enough to eat that food. So that food goes back to the land, and it has purpose. It just that it's her food. The rest of the food is for you. She brings it to the table for you. But yeah, what would your guys' approach be about teaching the language of the land.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Richard. I think those observations are almost a really good way to bring us to a close here today. To think about, when we really think about our world around us, we are surrounded by it. It sounds almost too simple to say, we're surrounded by the air, we're surrounded by the land and the waters. I went for a walk with my partner on the weekend, and we were walking by all these bushes, and the berries are almost ready for picking. And it was kind of cool to see, that the seasons change and things like that happen. When I was young, I was adopted by a Dutch family, and my dad, I think because I was really little back then, my dad was a market gardener. So he would push me into the raspberry bushes because I was small enough to go deeper in. And I really disliked it so much because there were all these daddy long-legged spiders. And I think that's where I developed my spider phobia from. These beautiful red raspberries, but there was like giant spiders right in front of my face. So that you made me think of that as you were speaking. So I think as we come to the end of our time together, I just again want to reiterate that the original intention for this program and the gatherings that you saw in the videos was to listen to elders and youth to inform how we in the OCMO, in partnership with the OPHO, report on First Nations connection to land. But as you've seen, I think even from the discussion that we've had after the videos, that the project has become so much more than that. We hope that everyone who attended the webinar today will have the opportunity to watch the other 2 regional films and take time to reflect on what you'll take away from the teachings shared by the knowledge keepers and the youth that they shared into this work. And you will find the links to the films and the report in the chat. And I believe we promised also to circulate by email if possible. If you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share later, once we stop for today, and the indicators that we're working on, we encourage you to reach out to Lena Hassan, who you have heard their voice on this video running the polls. They are one of the managers in our OCMO office, and they would be happy to connect with you with the environmental subject matter expertise, and they're helping our team working on the land and wellness indicators. And finally, I have a number of thanks. I just want to extend my thanks to everyone who contributed to this work, especially the knowledge keepers and the youth, including Elder Virginia. And I want to thank the OPHO, who has been dedicated to this work, and also thank our FNHA colleagues on some of the other teams, in addition to the OCMO, that have participated in this work, including our research and knowledge exchange team, and including the regional teams of Vancouver Coastal, Fraser Salish, and the Northern team. And again, I want to extend my huge thank you on behalf of Evan and Danielle and the whole team here that you can't see because they're too shy, for being here today, for the amazing, thoughtful comments and questions that have been put into the chat and the Q&A. And we will try to see how many we can respond to. And especially want to thank Elder Virginia for being here with us today. And I think in the spirit of that, it makes me think that Evan, I think, talked about generations and doing things for the generations to come, and voices like Elder Virginia and all the elders that participated in the knowledge keepers in these gatherings that have put their thoughts into this We Walk Together project are so valuable, because 7 generations from now, hopefully people will be able to see these videos, and still there are things that they will be helpful to them. So in the spirit of that, I would want to, I think we should stop. I think we just want to turn it over to Elder Virginia to close us out and just say thank you, everybody, yet again. And to be a little corny as we finish off, we are all walking together, both in this world and together in this project. So, Jimmy Witch, I raise my hands to all of you. Please, Elder Virginia, please close us out.